When I became an engineer, I took an oath. I promised to be responsible to future generations, and if I saw a problem, I would do something about it. And that's why I'm here talking to you today. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about Yukon's energy future, and there's a sense of anxiety and uncertainty that amongst Yukoners, there doesn't seem to be a plan. Natural gas is being discussed at all levels of our community right now. Whether it's imported as liquefied natural gas or fracked in our wilderness, people are wondering if this is a wise way to move forward. I'm also a scientist, and in the past year, I've studied natural gas, and I have discovered that it will lead us over a cliff to climate instability. To pull back from that cliff, I have a reinvention to present. We will reduce our fossil fuel use, improve our electrical system, and bring more renewable energy into our mix. And we will set the Yukon on a brighter path. I really want you to listen carefully. That's why I'm wearing my nicest clothes. To begin with, let's look at the Yukon's big energy picture. The green hydroelectricity is only 16% of our total energy requirement. Wood makes up about 5%, and wind is 0.1% at the moment. Right now, 80% of our energy in the Yukon comes from fossil fuel. That's the gray portion. The transportation sector is 60%, that's from fossil fuel, and the heating sector is 20%. That's propane and heating oil. And it's for keeping our homes and businesses warm in the winter. Let me first describe how that hydro works, that's 16%. In the Yukon, the electric grid is isolated. That means we get no electricity from outside. Our crown utility, Yukon Energy, owns and operates 3 hydro projects, and that's Mayo, Whitehorse, and Ajac. These projects are connected to the communities by transmission lines which snake across our landscape, and this is called the grid. The electricity is managed in Whitehorse by a computer system called SCADA. That's short for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. This diagram shows how the Yukon's grid works right now. The hydro plants convert energy from our rivers and lakes into electricity that flows into the transmission lines and then distributes the power to your home and business. The SCADA system manages the supply and storage to respond to your electrical needs. If we're short on hydro, then diesel is called on for backup. There are communities that are off-grid, and those are Old Crow, Watson Lake, Beaver Creek, Destruction Bay, and Burwash Landing, and they are exclusively powered by diesel. The diesel used in those communities and to back up the grid make up only 1% of our total energy needs. Okay, right now, both the Yukon's electrical utilities are considering importing LNG to meet this 1% slice of fossil fuel energy. Just so you know, so you can understand, LNG is methane. It's cooled to minus 160 degrees so that it can be transported as a liquid. When methane leaks, it's 100 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. From my research findings, burning methane for electricity is much more polluting than diesel because the gas industry has not been able to control methane leakage from the well all the way to the burner. And we could never tell because it's invisible. The scientists are now measuring it, and they're telling us that the natural gas transition is accelerating climate instability. This isn't going to help the Yukon reduce its greenhouse gas emission. I have a better solution. My idea is to replace the gray fossil fuel portion by first heating our homes and businesses with more renewable energy. And I'm going to show you how we'll start turning that whole pie green. Our 2 Yukon utilities recently commissioned a study that shows that over 10% of the Yukon's electricity already goes to space heating. From this graph, half of the space heating goes to 3 months of the year, and those are November, December, and January. Now let's look at the Yukon's total electricity needs. As you can see, more electricity is consumed in the winter, and that's due to increased heating load. Looks like a smile. So we need to find sources of renewable energy that can match that seasonal load pattern. Right now, the most accessible renewable energy sources that we have in Yukon are hydro, solar, and wind. So let's look at their seasonal patterns and see how they fit. This graph shows our hydro availability from month to month. Looks like a bit of a bumpy frown. So as you can see, though, there's lots of hydro in the summer, but hydro has a slight problem. Hydro is less available in the winter when we need it most. It gets frozen up in ice and snow, and presently it can't meet winter peaks. That is being met by diesel backup, and that's the dark portion on the graph. Solar has some potential for your business and home. Even on the wall of this art center, we now have a microgeneration policy to facilitate this sort of thing. Although solar is very minimal in the coolest winter months, hence the frown, solar is more powerful in the spring when our hydro reserves are depleted from the winter freeze. Since we have a bumper crop of solar in the summertime, it's a great fit for summer transportation when we all want to get out on the land. But I'm not going to talk about that. Today, we're talking about heating. Now, let's look at wind energy. In the Yukon, wind produces most of its energy in the wintertime when our electric space heating needs are highest. So there's another smile. In other words, the wind follows our heating needs. The best place for wind energy is in the Yukon is on mountaintops like Haeckel Hill above Whitehorse. That's because that's where it blows the strongest in the winter. This was the basis of my PhD work. Now, there's a lingering perception that wind doesn't work in the north because the turbines ice up. Well, let me quickly dispel this myth. In the 1990s, Yukon Energy was a leader in developing and testing blade heating technology and surface coatings to prevent icing on turbines. This technology is now an industry standard, and it's partly because of the Yukon's pioneering work. One example of how well wind works in the north is close by, to the east of us in the NWT. This is the Diavik diamond mine, and they now have a 9-megawatt wind farm that runs in icing environments and with heated blades, and they're saving diesel fuel. They're going to make an 8-year payback. The only regret is that they wish they built it 5 years earlier. This kind of project suits our diesel community. A Yukon example is the Kulani First Nations. They are actively pursuing a wind project to displace diesel for Burwash Landing in Destruction Bay. Their chief is Mithi Alatini, who's giving a TEDx talk this afternoon. This, for the Yukon grid, a good example of a northern wind project is Fire Island in the Cook Inlet of Alaska. It feeds 18 megawatts into the grid that powers Anchorage and surrounding area. So wind is doable in the north, and our neighbors are approving it. The biggest problem with wind is it doesn't blow all the time. So how do we store wind energy? When you think about storage, what do you think? On a utility scale, chemical batteries like this one are rarely used. They're expensive, and they have a short lifespan, but they are improving. On the Yukon grid, there are two main forms of energy storage that we're using right now. Ajac Lake, for example, provides a water reservoir with multi-year energy storage. This means that Yukon Energy can hold back the water in that reservoir for up to a few years. You see, wind and hydro storage complement each other. When it's windy, we can store that energy into the water reservoir. The second one is the diesel tank. The diesel fuel in that tank stores energy. It is a geological form of energy derived from several 100 million years of old carbon. It's compressed and stored into one small volume. The third form of energy storage is called heat. It's heat stored in your electric hot water tank. The next time the power goes out, check to see if you still have hot water in your tank after a few hours. That's because the tank is insulated. Today, I'm introducing you to another form of heat storage, and it stores heat just like your hot water tank does. It's called the electrical thermal storage, or ETS for short. Instead of water, it uses a bunch of bricks, like this one. This brick is made of dense iron oxide ceramic clay, and it means there's a lot of iron in it. It's harmless, unless you drop it on your foot. Pretty heavy. It stores way more heat than water. As you know, water boils beyond 100 degrees Celsius. This brick can hold heat for up to 700 degrees Celsius. An ETS is just a bunch of bricks like this one, stacked inside an insulated metal box with heating elements in between the bricks, elements just like the one in your electric oven. A fan blows the air between the hot bricks, just like this, and it delivers the heat to your house as needed. It's just an electric furnace that can store heat. It comes in many different sizes. It's used in many places across North America and even in Alaska. The unit only needs to recharge for 1 to 8 hours a day, and it decides that based on how cold it is outside. You can also get a larger unit, or better yet, you can super insulate your house, and that will keep heat for several days at a time, even in the coldest weather. Okay, let's review. Right now, the Yukon's grid is powered mostly by hydro. The electricity is distributed to your home through the transmission lines, and the SCADA system ensures that there's enough hydro coming in to supply your electrical needs. The shortfall is met by diesel backup. Some of the electricity is stored as heat in your hot water tank. My idea is that we have an additional form of heat, the ETS. It will only be run on renewable energy, namely wind and hydro. Remember the features of wind energy? Wind is stronger in the winter, but it doesn't blow all the time. It's intermittent. Well, I'm sure you might be feeling a little uneasy about this idea of heating your home with a renewable energy that doesn't blow all the time, especially when it's minus 40. How do we reconcile this? Well, hold on, I'll explain. Earlier, I described how the year-round electrical need drops in the summer and rises in the winter. Well, there's another pattern that happens, the daily pattern. What did you do first thing this morning? You got up, put on the coffee, had a shower, turned on the radio, made breakfast, checked your email, and your car was plugged in so that you could drive up here to listen to all these great TEDx talks. Well, that's the first peak seen by the SCADA system over at Yukon Energy. Continuing with your day, the power dips a bit, and because you're here or at work, and then at about 4 o'clock, everybody heads home and then starts cooking dinner. And if you have teenagers, they start up their Xbox or they have one long hot shower. That's the 6 o'clock peak. These bumps are called demand peaks. In the middle of winter, we sometimes don't have enough hydro to meet those peaks. As you can see, the part above that we have to burn diesel to make up the shortfall. And to reduce our demand, we have to shave those peaks. My idea is to use the ETS and the hot water tank to shave those peaks and fill the valleys, flattening out our daily load, and maximize the use of our hydro and wind when it's blowing. The ETS only recharges when we're not using diesel, which is usually in those valleys. Remember I mentioned that wind and hydro reservoirs complement each other? We can use hydro to store wind and then transfer it to your ETS, doing just this. What I like most about the ETS is that I no longer need to have an oil tank in my house. The furnace is quiet, it's safe, and there's no more emissions from my home. The advantage of storing heat in your house is that if the power goes out, well, you still have hot water, and you could still heat your home. Okay, so what needs to happen to make all this work? The ETS and the hot water needs to be managed to meet your daily needs, and you want it to be filled with renewable energy, but you don't want to be in charge of that. Well, that's the job of your Crown utility, the electricity manager. Yukon Energy will monitor both the heat stored in your home and the activities from the renewable energy side. This is the foundation of a smart grid, and you don't need a smart meter to do it. We already have it. By being able to control multiple units with the SCADA system, the utility is able to shave off electricity from the daily peaks and maximize the available hydro during the night. When the wind blows and the sun shines, the smart grid redirects the renewable electricity to meet the demand and stores the excess energy into hydro reservoirs and our homes and businesses. The beautiful thing about this idea is we can reduce our fossil fuel dependency, we can grow our electrical load, and our renewable energy projects in a predictable and well-planned steps. As we build up our smart grid, we can start adding other forms of energy storage, like new hydro, large batteries, hydrogen fuel cells, or electric cars and trucks as they become affordable, further greening that energy pie. The title of this talk, A Cold Wind Heating Yukon Homes. So now you know what I mean, and my job is done. Now yours starts. Invest in electrical thermal storage, insulate your home, and then tell your utilities and government that you want wind farms to heat your homes and businesses. The power of reinvention is this wind turbine will heat the homes of Whitehorse down in the Yukon River Valley. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Merci, Joe.